I was at a gathering recently at the home of our next guest where someone said something just so stimulating. They said, "A wizard knows the hidden paths." And that was really interesting because this was basically what could best be described as a gathering of wizards. And wizard is a term that has been eclipsed in recent years by the term shaman when people are trying to describe a person of magic, a person of deep humanity, somebody that brings that magic and that humanity to bear in service to the community, to the culture that they're a part of. And our guest for this conversation is a tremendous teacher of wizards. And what makes him a tremendous teacher is that the way that they speak, the way that they teach, the way that they offer their knowledge is with a sense of childlike wonder, not with the cumbersome, burdened by the weight of my authority sort of voice of a teacher that I think too many of us have grown accustomed to or have experienced in our paths through academia or our careers. No, 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 no. Somebody that is in a state of awe, that holds that awe for you and shares it with you, that is a true teacher. And that especially is the kind of teacher who can show you what it means when you hear a phrase like hidden paths. Because these paths, they don't have signposts. Well, in the way that we understand them. They're not drawn in the kinds of lines that you might see on a sign or on a screen or on a page. They're not so visible as much as they're felt. And so being in that place of awe, that place of wonder, that place of revelry is holding a bit of a compass for others to help them understand how it is that they feel and how they can behold the paths that might become apparent to them and guide them through life. The way that I experience some of these hidden paths, it's in the in-between of the perceiver and the perceived. It's a forgotten scent in a perfume as somebody walks past that brings you back to a core memory. It's a symbol, a color, a place, a breeze, something that evokes a deeper recognition of where is it that you come from and where is it that you're trying to go. To the wizard, these paths are out in the waking world. They are in the pages of books. They are in the master strokes that they see on paintings. This entire conversation that you're about to be a fly on the wall for is a teaching from one of the greatest wizards I know, sharing their awe about how they followed the hidden paths in their life, how they interact with the masters and the strokes that they have left behind for us to learn from, and invites me, and through me in this conversation, invites you to be in that with them. Which way is north? All right, so to kick it off, you get to decide how you want to be referred to in this conversation.
Right, right. And I like the idea of being referred to from the archetypal place so that I can practice giving myself permission for stepping into that space.
Nice.
Rather than the identity that I have or others know me by. And so that identification, that space would be the artist / wizard.
I love the duality of it. Well, they're not opposites. It's two colors blended together.
Yeah, they kind of do go together.
Yeah. Let's deepen the hues of each of them. Because it's where my interest goes, I want to know more about the wizard. What do you mean by wizard?
Right. So to know more about the wizard, we also should examine the idea of magic.
Right.
And how we define magic.
Right.
And magic is kind of, the sort of cliche of it is that we kind of abracadabra something, right? This term that's a sort of gibberish in our culture. The truth is, and I find this really exciting, that the word abracadabra in Hebrew means I create as I speak. It's not gibberish. It's like the first spell ever, right?
Isn't it so exciting when a cliche like that has a deeper, profound meaning underneath it that people don't know about?
It is magic hidden in plain sight. It's
Yeah.
super exciting. And so I create as I speak. That is the power of creation. That also is the purview of the artist. That's why they're not really opposites. Like the I create as I speak is my ability to phase up an idea into reality, to turn a thought into a thing. So that thought, as it becomes a thing, has to raise its vibration or solidify its vibration, and that vibration is voice. That is the first spell that turns something, that turns nothing into something.
And in that spirit of turning nothing into something for the listeners, help them visualize the wizard here. Who's our prototype? What is the avatar?
What does he look like?
Yeah, if there is one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I keep sort of defaulting to the Gandalfian view, but I sort of feel like he's also maybe a shapeshifter, maybe someone who is. I think the way I think about it is I am receiving the archetype as a role that I want to play into, and that comes with a certain age. But I also feel like I'm 29 in my head. But I will say that the dude wields a great big pencil, just like one of those.
That's the wand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's the
is the
magic
pencil.
wand, right? Is the Dixon Ticonderoga #2 pencil, right? That glorified burnt stick that we use to phase ideas up into something.
Yeah, so age and wizardry don't have to go hand in hand. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be a gray beard.
yeah. I don't think so. I don't think that it's. I don't think it's a rule of wizardry. I think it's sort of internal permission, and I think that there's also like multidisciplinary views of it, right? Like, so what's a wizard? Someone who gathers knowledge and carries it forward. But there's also different ways of having wisdom. I think we were saying earlier there's a kid that's 16 years old playing for the Spanish national soccer team. That's a kind of wizardry he carries that that has nothing to do with his age.
Bringing something new to the conversation, to the culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's exciting about a wizard is there's a there is a deep well of both institutional and experiential knowledge that allows for them to be absolutely present and fresh in the moment with new ideas.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
that's super exciting to me.
that's maybe the wizened part, right? Is to know what the conversation has been before they join it, and then have something magical to say.
Right, right. Like, in Christian Detroit's Arthurian tales, Merlin, the magician, moves backwards through time, right? So he's always in the right place at the right time because he's moving into spaces that he already knows.
Yeah.
And so I joke that, especially living in LA, I have perfect timing, right? Because you're never going to be on time when you're going to a meeting somewhere. You're going to be late.
Yeah.
But if I'm late and my timing is perfect, I'm okay.
A wizard arrives precisely when they mean to.
Exactly.
This is great. Okay, so we are talking with the artist wizard. Want to drop into the questions?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
All right, first one, and I'll just let it take you where it wants to, and I can clarify as you need.
Sure.
You're the pilot here. I'm just the nav system.
Okay.
What's in front of you?
What is in front of me? I am 61, And what's in front of me is my third act. Who am I creating myself to be as I move into the third act of my life?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's, there's another little piece that I'll add to this is that at the beginning of my second act, I wrote a letter to myself because I was at a crossroads trying to figure out what my second act was going to look like. So I wrote a letter to myself from myself at the end of my third act. And so that was 30 years ago. And now I got another 30 before I meet him. And I am, I feel like I am ever more intent on meeting up with that guy.
Talk
Like, so
about
that's
moving
my,
backwards in time.
yeah, yeah. So that's, so I, so what's in front of me is checking in
Yeah.
with, am I on track for becoming that, that artist wizard?
How do you know when a new act is coming in?
How do you know when a new act is coming in? You know, we are an antenna for our lives. This amazing construct of the human body has got a ton of amazing information coming in it at all times. And we typically default to the thinking side of things. And I think in order to, I think, uh, I feel that in order to uh, listen for that third act, or whatever act that you're in, for that curtain call, it takes a multiplicity of your senses. It takes your thinking, your feeling, your intuition, your friends, where you feel you are. It might take a letter to that future self.
Hmm.
There are lots of tools for it. The, there are some things to process in it also, like grief,
Hmm.
like understanding that the act that you're in is ending, and dealing with the grief that leads to an acceptance of that.
So is there an artist's eye in that, in terms of, the Shakespearean line, if all the world's a stage? Is it
Mm.
noticing that the colors and the characters on stage have changed?
Yeah, yeah. What does Puck say at the end of Midsummer Night's Dream? Something about um, our tales here are ended. I can't remember exactly what it is. I'm sure there's people out there that have it memorized. It's beautiful.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you have a feeling. You feel that there is a realigned purpose, that the purpose that drove you to this place had validity, and that validity is evolving. So, like moving into being the wizard or the crone or the mentor or the elder, you know, there are archetypes and roles to be played to suck the marrow out of this life.
We had an earlier conversation where you introduced to my psyche the concept of completion,
Hmm.
and that was just pure medicine. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that idea.
Well, I'd love to hear from you how that was medicine. I know you're the nav system here, but what was medicine about that for you? I love that.
Well, it's just such a beautiful concept to hold dear,
Mm.
and to to move towards, to be, because it's not a casting aside, it's not a severance, a losing. There's not quite a grief in the idea. There's a warmth. It's the soup is complete. It's ready to be served,
Yeah,
right? And then it's eaten, and the meal is complete, and it's ready to be digested.
yeah.
And uh, I don't. I didn't feel before you had shared the idea of completion in life with me like that's something that I was conditioned to look for.
Mm,
We kind of step into new chapters with a sense of perpetuity.
right,
We don't really think about how it's going to end.
right. Well, I think this very much comes from the art world, right? Like you got to sign a painting sooner or later,
Ah.
right? And so there's a there's um, a mechanism inside of that signature that connotes a completion that allows for a lot of really cool stuff to happen. So I think about it, and without getting too structural on this, some of the things that I talk about are these universal laws of creativity,
Mm-hmm.
and so the first one is belief. How do you believe in something? And one of the tools for believing in something is a good story, like being able to craft a story that carries experience into knowledge, into wisdom. Um, that is one of the universal laws of creativity, is to get to a place of belief, and that catalyzes a whole bunch of other creative things that happen when you can finish strong on something that you've been creating. When you can complete it, drop that signature on it, whatever it is, and even just declaring it complete. Like, you don't have to sign something. There are things that you can complete. Like, you can complete a conversation with a dead person just because you say so. Like, the tool of completion is incredibly powerful. You don't need that person there to have a completion conversation with
Mm.
them.
Right.
Once you get the power of completion from the inside out, then what it becomes is a tool for believing.
Right, because it closes the system and it allows the bell to ring.
Right, right. It closes
Closes
the
the loop,
circuit
the
and says,
circle.
like, now that I made this boss thing, I believe in myself even more, right? Because I put my signature on this. This is,
Is that so? Is the signature in art the last act?
um, in principle. But I mean, there's this story of Auguste Renoir, one of the great Impressionist painters, where his friends would stop inviting him over to dinner because he would want to finish the paintings that he gave them. You know, right? Like,
I understand that.
right? Like,
Yes.
there's another one that comes from Cezanne that says, like, people often ask, like, how do you know that you're finished with something? And Cezanne says it takes two people to complete a painting: the painter and somebody to tell him to knock it off.
Yeah.
So when you can internalize that knock it off note, right? Like, when you can actually get to a place where you're really clear on this is complete,
Yeah.
then there's an incredible power in that,
Yeah.
because it automatically lights the fuse on whatever you're making next. And so there are
Mm.
times when I'm working on a painting and I'm in the interior of the spiral on it. I'm in the detail part of the spiral of it, right? And I'm knocking in a little eyelash. Oh, that was amazing, right? And then I go a little highlight on the nose. Pow! Oh my God, And then I step back in and I draw a little, highlight on the eye, and I'm elated. And then I step back and look at it, and I step forward for the next mark, and then I step back again and see what's the next mark. And then I step forward and nothing happens. And I think, oh, shit, I, I just finished. Like, there's something also really exciting about that. Like, to exit, like to finish um, um, almost unconsciously. Like, to be so in that zone where you don't have any more moves
Mm.
left,
Mm.
right? And there's still that bubbling energy from it, that is like, okay, cool, that one's done. What's next?
So I was keen to flip it to the next direction, but you just uncovered something I really want to talk about. Where we had this experience together. We went to a museum, and you instructed me. You're like, stand there, and it was about somewhere between 3 and 5 feet away from the canvas of whatever painting it was we were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And the spot was where the artist does that dance that you were describing, where
Mm,
they
mm,
they add the stroke and then they step back.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the principle that you were teaching me was that in some respects, that spot is where the art is, just as much as the canvas,
Right.
because it's where, on theme with this direction of what is in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
where the artist stands with their work in front of them.
Right. So this is a little fantasy that I have. Um, so it kind of goes like this. So when the Getty bought a Van Gogh for $77 million, I was just like, WTF, right? For a bunch of different reasons. Like, they're buying dead guy's work for $77 million. This guy sold 2 paintings in his life. Why is this that like, I want to go see it, right? And the Getty's here in Los Angeles. I go once a month to the Getty. I love it there.
Mm.
And so I went and I spent, like, I don't know, maybe 6 hours in the room where they had this painting. And it was a big splash. We have this painting from Van Gogh, and so there's a lot of people going to see it. And so I sat there and watched how people responded to the painting. And I think if you could plot where they stood on the floor in front of the painting, you would get what do they call those? Like a density plot or
Yeah,
something like
a
that.
heat map.
A
Like,
heat
yeah,
map, right?
yeah.
Of where everybody stood that was the sweet spot for the painting. Now, as a painter, I recognize how he did that technique. It's not like what Kurt Douglas did in the Van Gogh movie, where it's like a frenetic pace of, throwing paint all the time. It's
Mm.
very intentional mark making. Now, he did 90 paintings in 120 days once, which is a pretty frenetic pace. But his stroke making is very intentional. You lift up a bunch of paint on a thing that you think is accurate, you step forward and you lay it on with what you believe is the last stroke. Like, there's a real intention about it. It's intense
Mm.
to create the paintings the way he created them. And so I think about his life and the challenges that he had, and what we call now mental illness. But at that time that he was painting, there was no medication, diagnosis, excuse for it. He was fucking crazy as far as people were concerned.
Right.
He was so intense about the utter, magnificent, majestic beauty of every instant that it was obliterating his capacity to act normally in the world,
I
right?
remember at the Van Gogh Museum, a little factoid that they shared without much context, which is people didn't like sitting for portraits with him. And I have to imagine that had to be from the intensity of his eye.
Right. Dude was super intense. So you think about this. Like, here's a guy who is living this incredible intensity in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, right? Um, uh, uh, Maybe not the 80s. I don't know when he passed away.
I think that's about
1870s, something
right.
like that, right? So he's living this incredible intensity. He's undaunted by the commercial aspects of the thing that he's up to. He is creating these. He's got skills. He's a draftsman. He's good, but this is a whole new way of creating image making. You have a bunch of other threads like photography coming in, and the École de Beaux-Arts, and guys like Bouguereau who are painting the veins on flies' wings. There's a great story from Renoir again, who for the first time in, like, I don't know, 1888, got eyeglasses. Right? They weren't super popular. He finally got some
It's
eyeglasses.
like, oh no.
He put the eyeglasses on. He threw them down on the table and he said, "Oh my God, I see like Bouguereau." Right? So in the art world, that's a super funny joke. Right? Um, and so there were all of these other threads. So this idea of impressionism, this idea that this is how I feel about this thing, right,
Yeah.
was pretty revolutionary. And a breakdown in the approach to color also, right? So color theory based on how light refracts, how these guys were painting light, not painting things, and that distinction was revolutionary at the time.
And so it impresses upon you, the viewer. So it seems like from your heat map that people don't even need to be commanded to stand in that spot. They're demanded.
Right. So you think about this. He created at this level of intensity, and then he has these tools, a stick, a wooden stick with natural hair brushes on it, pigments that come from the earth, oils that are pulled from walnuts and olives and things like that. Right. So he's got these natural tools that are, after a long test of history, apt transmitters of human consciousness, right? The pigments, right?
Wands.
They're magic wands, right?
Yeah.
And so he's operating at this intense level of experience in his life. And then I drive to the Getty, and I'm driving down the freeway at 75 miles an hour. There's cars going the other way at 75 miles an hour. We're passing each other at 150 miles an hour. I've got the radio on. I'm eating my lunch. I'm doing my makeup. I'm reaching behind the seat to, like, fiddle with my bag to pull out, I don't know, my pot, whatever, right? So I can be ready when I go. Like that, I have all of this intensity that's baseline for me. Like I'm handling that,
Yeah.
right? And so then I get to the Getty and I see this painting and I go, oh, I get him, right? Like my baseline of intensity was his intensity. So I see the vibration from the surface of this painting and I recognize intensity.
Is that something that you would offer to people when they go to a museum and put art in front of them, is to try to find their match?
Well, I mean, I think that, yeah, I think let me sort of close the
Yeah.
circuit on
Let's
this.
complete it. Yeah.
Is that then what I find as a painter is if I were to paint this piece of Van Gogh's, how would I approach it? Well, I would have my stuff set up around here, and then I would step forward, and where would I have to step back to begin to understand the story that I'm telling with the paint, the story of light, right? So if I go too far back, then I lose it before I get to the surface again to make a mark. If I get too close, then I'm too inside of the vibration of the paint itself, and I lose it. And so I have to find this sweet spot that is in between the shattering of it and the mollification of it in the distance. And that spot, when I think about what that spot is, where the painter stood, that's where the heat map was. And so I almost feel like this apt collection of psychic energy or consciousness that was used to make the painting is not only on the surface of the painting, but it's projecting itself out into space. That there's almost, this is my fantasy, that there's almost this hologram, this eternal hologram of Van Gogh painting this piece, because that energy, like a magnifying glass, like if the surface of the painting is a magnifying glass, it's aiming out into space, into this sweet spot where people gathered. And that's why this is a fantasy. There's no evidence to it. I can't prove it. But my theory is that there's we don't have the capacity at this time to measure, but there's a real effect that a painting is projecting into space that people will receive.
Well, I mean, it's brilliant, and it's deeply human. We could scan that painting in 40,000K resolution, and we could get every minute detail, and we could register on a hard drive the chemical composition of all of the paint. We could get every bit of information, and it still would not be able to apprehend that spot.
Right, right.
That's a human medium that experiences that.
Yeah, yeah. So, leading to your next question, when I go to the museum with people, I think about meeting with my friends. My friends are all dead, but they have left messages for me. And so as a painter, my job is to listen for what they want to say about their time, about light, about love, about this person, about like what's the story that they want to tell me. And so I go to the museum. I had this amazing art history teacher in art school because I was freaked out going to museums. Everything is amazing. I can't see it all. I'm exhausted trying to. No, you just go and you visit your friends. There's tons of pieces in the museum. Some you'll get along with, some you won't. A good museum visit is a intimate visit with a few friends, and maybe you make an extra one here or there.
It sounds like the key to finding them is to stand where they stood.
Yeah. Yeah, to see what the story is that they want to tell.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
What's behind you?
Apologies.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I feel like this third act is me moving into um, who both I say I choose to be and who I feel like my friends are waiting for me to be.
Hmm.
So what's behind me is, uh, I mean, a sweeter answer is all of the scaffold that's held me up to where I am right now.
Hmm.
But I think I also, as I move into this third act, think about what I want to leave behind. I mean, I think that's almost how I took your question.
Well, that has to be part of it,
Yeah.
right?
And so I think that the first thing that comes to mind is apologies.
And do you mean that in terms of apologies for things of the past or apologies for stepping into the future?
Yeah, what do I mean by that?
Those are my two
Because it's a
possible
kind of it's a
interpretations.
little bit of a slippery thought, and the more I think about it, the more I'm trying to justify its existence, and I feel like I don't want to I don't want to pose this in the negative by posing it in the
Well,
negative,
it's
but
beautiful in the neutrality, too.
I feel like I have spent some time waiting for the permission to be not normal about stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and to offer the the things that I see that are outside of the standard deviation, and there's been a lot of sort of waiting for those permissions, and um, and I don't want to wait for those anymore.
I think that's profound and powerful and timely. And what comes to mind for me is the last track of Kendrick Lamar's last record, which was this like personal regression therapy journey into himself.
Mm,
And the last track is called, I think it's called Mirror. And the chorus is, I choose me, I'm sorry.
right,
Is that a
right,
bit of what you're talking
right.
about?
It's sort of like I choose me. I'm not sorry.
Sure.
Right,
Right.
like um, there's a phrase that I just ran across recently that I wish I had seen sooner. If I'm not changing it, I'm choosing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super powerful for me, particularly right now. If I'm not changing it, then I'm choosing it. So what am I choosing? And if I'm choosing it, I'm not apologizing for it.
Right.
I'm choosing it because this is the choice that I make.
And you mentioned something earlier that I took to mean that you've got some people in your life that have been encouraging and want to see you actualize in this way that the third act really represents.
Right.
And so there's a shedding here of these binds that kept you from being maybe this fully realized person. It sometimes it feels like those binds come from other people, and so at the same time this want for you to fully self-actualize feels like it comes from other people. What are those binds that hold us?
Right. There's a great phrase from Sartre's existentialism. L'enfer, c'est les autres. Right. Hell, it's other people. Right.
Uh-huh.
Right. And that sort of encapsulates Sartre's view of things, which I think is super cynical. Um, and there's validity to it,
Yeah.
uh, I'm in a situation that I'm exploring what it would be to not be in that situation because of the people. It's amazing to have people in your life who see you as your potential, because we often don't. Like, we have a lot of
Yeah.
internal talk,
Yeah.
about I'm not good enough and blah blah blah, right? All of the self-talk that holds us back. So, I would say that l'enfer, c'est moi et les autres. It's me and other people if I let it,
Hmm.
right? And so that's where the non-apology comes in. Um, uh, um, it's uh, it's magnificent when you have people who see you as your potential. That, they've done these studies um, on happiness, showing that what you really need to be happy is like 15 people who totally believe in you. You don't need thousands of followers. In fact, that's sometimes counterproductive because of the millions of followers, there's a standard deviation and there's a percentage of them that tell you suck.
And it can bind you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that, finding that your kin that believe in you, and then checking in with them to see how you can continue um, to evolve. It's why you're here with me today.
To reframe the question, who is behind you, right? And who's
In a
looking
way,
after you, who's supporting you,
right,
who's giving you a little bit of a push.
right, right.
Yeah.
There's an amazing documentary called Happy by Adrian and Rocco Bellic, Belic. It's called Happy. It's the last 75 years of happiness research.
Mm.
And it's amazing. What does it take to be happy? They sort of break it down that there's like a certain percentage of your happiness that you don't have a lot of control over. It's somewhere around 25 to 35%. It's the station that you're in, your economic situation or whatever, your health. There's about, whatever, 25% of your happiness that you don't have a whole lot of control over for whatever reason, right? But there's 75% that you do.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And if you could be 75% happy,
That's pretty good.
that's pretty happy.
That's a C, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a happy life, right? And so what are some things that you can do to be happy? And this documentary talks about it. And one of the things is having a small cohort of enthusiastic believers.
Mm.
And I think that that's what's behind me.
Mm. Lovely. What do you receive?
What do I receive? I think right now I'm in this meditation on why beauty is so important. I don't have all the answers to it. I know it leads to joy, and joy is part of the algorithm that lets you be happier in your life.
Mm.
I think right now I'm also in a practice of receiving others, receiving input, and even receiving myself. Like being the artist wizard. Like that's a tricky space. Like,
Yeah.
can you do that without it sounding like ego? Can I receive that from the inside out? Can I play that role of artist wizard the way fucking Gandalf does?
Mm-hmm. Right, because we're seeing Ian McKellen. We're like, go, buddy.
Right, like that dude owns his thing. Thou shall not pass. Right?
Say it again. Do it again.
Holy
Right? They're
shit!
making
Right?
scream
Like
it in
that
classrooms.
Balrog. You're not getting past me. That's some balls right there.
Right.
Right?
And
Like,
it saved the fellowship's ass.
right? Right? And it turned him into the white wizard.
Right. So fully embodied.
Right. Like, so receive. That's, I think, what I'm receiving is the artist wizard.
Mm.
Like at the place of Gandalf standing on the bridge.
Ah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
can I receive that? And am I up for the tumble?
Yeah. Can you find the sword in the fall?
Right. Right.
Ah, Tolkien is so good.
So good. So good. Yeah,
And
that's that's a mythology that's a psychology also.
so then quickly taking that energy and moving it to the other direction, what do you give?
Right. I think everything. I think I think I give that which is most dear and precious to me, like heart and soul. I give all of the gifts that I've been given.
There's a thread of beauty there from one side to the other,
Hmm.
I perceive.
Say more about that.
Well, beauty was the first answer for
Hmm.
what you receive, if I remember correctly.
Hmm.
And I hear in the way that you're talking about it a wanting to pass through that thread of beauty like a loom without pressuring yourself to fully understand it on either side. To receive beauty and to give beauty.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like, uh, I feel intrinsically, I think, as I was saying before, like obliterated by instance of beauty so often that it's almost debilitating. The light coming through the trees right now, um, the music of that crazy siren we just heard off in the distance,
Yeah.
um, the language of the birds. There's enough to be um, swamped by the majesty of every moment. Why? Like, why? What is it about my nervous system or my collection of cells that is so resonant with those things that range into the sublime?
Well, there's something trained in there. I'm enamored by the idea of the artist's hand.
Mm.
And I've seen you do your work, and you're able to very quickly capture the beauty that you're receiving with the rendering on a page in such a way that you minimize the corruption of it. How do your hands do that?
Yes, I had a great teacher who said to me once, "This is not something that you do. This is something that you be.
Hmm.
You can't do it. You conduit."
Ah, you are a conduit, so there it is. Yeah.
You have to do that with the accent. My accent's terrible, but that's the only way that
Well, you're
story
trying to be
works.
true to the teacher.
I'm trying to be true to the teacher. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't do it. You can't do it. Um, so I think that that's really also the thing that's super exciting is training enough to get the fuck out of the way.
Hmm.
And it's not about drawing; it's about seeing. And then the drawing itself is an artifact, an act of measurement against the objective of receiving what's seen. So there's sometimes where I'll teach a class and I'll draw left-handed, and I am no left-handed.
Hmm.
That's a Nego Montoya.
Is that a different side of you that comes through the left hand?
Well, it's an unskilled tool. I can do the same with my foot.
Right.
It's not, the point is not, the coordination is not the objective. The objective is seeing. And the drawing is an indication of the clarity of my ability to see. It's kind of why I don't drink. I don't drink because I don't like how I draw the next day. I
Hmm.
feel like drinking alcohol impacts my ability to see.
Hmm.
And so like, where was I the other day? I was at a Starbucks. I was driving, stopped at a Starbucks for breakfast. And I didn't bring anything with me into the Starbucks. I figured I'd be in and out, but there's a long line. And so I drew everybody in the place. I didn't have my sketchbook. I didn't have a tool for it. I just drew everybody. Um, Saw posture. How would I approach this? I do this stuff in my head,
Hmm.
just as a exercise in seeing.
Without your hand.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. No, I just said like, hey, that guy stooped over, or look at she's pretty, or how would I solve for that face? How would I solve for that posture? And so I do drawings in my head
Wow.
as a practice of seeing. I probably, and what happens when I do that is I probably could recreate those drawings now because they're imprinted. It's a way of um, I don't know, drinking life, experiencing, not letting a moment pass.
What do you think is happening with people in the way that we're using our hands on keyboards and screens versus with
Yeah,
wands, pencils, brushes?
man, I used to love drawing at the airport. Everybody was doing something different. They had their papers or books or conversations, and everybody at the airport is looking at a phone. I stopped drawing at the airport because it's the same fucking pose
Wow.
with everybody.
I didn't expect that as an answer, but
It's a little bit
yeah.
dystopic. So,
The grief of the artist who's losing forms.
I mean, the vocabulary of poses out in the world right now is highly diminished because of our gadgets.
Wow.
That's empirical experience right there.
Wow.
That is like I don't draw in airports anymore because it's just no fun. It's the same pose over and over again.
Is there a place where the poses are,
Is there a place?
yeah,
Wow. Uh, yeah, I don't know, amusement parks, zoos, places where people are in the experience of
yeah,
something.
yeah.
Places where people are in the experience of their phone, no. Um, but places where they're in the experience of something, where they're in their lives, yeah.
Hmm. What shines upon you?
Hmm. I would say those friends, those people in my life. Like, like there are amazing, extraordinary people in my life. Last weekend was 4th of July weekend, and I was with like 50 friends from college. That was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And that felt so good. Like there's no performing. There's no,
They
I mean,
know.
they know who I am. And in
Yeah.
fact, it was really fun. Like one of my longtime friends who I love, we've known each other for 40 years. She was like, "What did you do at Disney? Were you at Disney?" Somebody said you were. What did you do there? It didn't matter to her.
Yeah.
It's not part of the equation for her. We love each other,
Yeah.
and so yeah, like that. That's what shines is the like living in the long arc of life with people who are have their own magic.
That's the light.
Yeah.
And what do you rest upon?
I think that there is only love. It's a thing I forget sometimes, but all of this beauty, all of what connects the friends, all of what turns a thought into a thing, everything that a wizard plays for, there is only love. And that's the potion inside of all of the spells.
Hmm.
And it's coming back to that as the blessing and principle. And there's no layer below that. Like that's the ground floor.
Hmm.
There's ways to get there, like gratitude is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like just finding something to be grateful for. That can take you down to that place where it's just the ground floor. There is only love.
Reflecting on all these directions and how they intersect, what's in your heart?
Well, aside from the only love, some worry. Some worry about our youngness. Immaturity is kind of the more cliche word, but our youngness as a species on this planet, our uh, desire, I don't know, our lostness in the face of the fact that there's only love. I worry about our ability to move from this place of polarity that we are in right now. Like we are in
Mm-hmm.
a particular part of a great cycle that is desiring polarities, and I I have some concerns. And this is where I'm feeling this is in my heart. I have some concerns about our ability to evolve or adapt out of this space of looking for polarities as a species.
What do you see as the way out of that?
Um, Listening, a deeper listening, uh, and, and an understanding of the power of beauty. I think we can perpetrate atrocities because we forget about beauty. Nobody's ever smelled a rose and said, fucking shit. um, so I think that it's not about finding the middle. It's about listening for what's true. And we are in this very strange place in our society right now where we have algorithmically sabotaged our ability to love each other because our systems of disseminating information are predicated on gathering attention into units that are revenue generating. And so it's not about truth or beauty um, or what works. It's about how do I capture your attention.
Hmm.
And in a world where we are reinforcing the structures that capture attention, it stops mattering what attention you're trying to capture. You just need to capture attention. And that polarizes
Hmm.
automatically.
Hmm.
So, what's needed or necessary, there's sites like Tangle, or the Tangle, I think it's called, where there's aggregations of information from all sides of a story. We don't fight over things. We fight over stories. That's what causes all of the consternation and violence in the world is the story. So it's part of why I really drill down on the power of story and why telling stories is so important, so that we understand the stories that are being told to us, how they're manipulating us, and how we can tell stories that can drive connection.
That's the way out. First, recognizing what we're stuck in.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to meet the artist wizard.
Oh, what a delightful conversation, man. I love talking with you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be your nav system.
Yeah. Thank you for guiding these questions. I think they're super valuable. I trust that as we've had this conversation, anybody who's listening mirrors it. What is it for them to answer these questions?
Yeah, that's a great way to listen to each other. Just kind of where we begin.
Yeah.
So we'll end with where we begin. Thank you.
Thank you.